The iPhone 14 Pro, one of Apple's most controversial releases in the last couple of years, except for the iPad 10th gen. This phone left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, including my own. It felt like Apple had taken a step back, tweaked a couple of things, changed up the colors a little bit, and released it as a new phone. And for a starting price of 1,400 Canadian dollars, it didn't really feel like it was worth the upgrade. But I've been using the iPhone 14 Pro Max for the last couple of weeks, and despite a couple of quirks, it's actually been a really good experience. This year's iPhone 14 Pro packs in the A16 Bionic, and although I don't really like talking specs a lot on this channel because I usually just tend to give my own experiences, this chip is kind of important. The A16 Bionic is the fastest chip ever in an iPhone, and technically the fastest chip that's ever been in a phone, except for maybe the 8 Plus Gen 1, because there are a few cases where they go toe to toe. The thing is, with the iPhone, this much computational power doesn't really mean much. I mean, even the A13 Bionic, a chip that was found in the iPhone 11, is still more than enough to do everything today and is plenty for the average consumer. The reason I think this is important to mention though is because the overall experience of the iPhone has stayed the same throughout the last few years. Yes, things like Face ID are faster, the overall efficiency and battery life that these chips bring is better, and with the improved cameras, these chips help a lot with the actual processing that's needed. But at the end of the day, it's still an iPhone. And that's not a bad thing. You see, I've been using the Z Fold 4 and I've had virtually no issues with that phone. But it's obviously not a device that's meant for everyone. It's expensive, it could be quite cumbersome, and most people just don't want a foldable phone. So for me to tell you that one phone is better than the other, it would just be my own subjective opinion. So when it comes to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, if I had to completely block the Z Fold 4 out of my memory and pretend that it didn't exist, this is a great phone, and it's a great phone that'll be suitable for most people. By the way, I would also really appreciate a sub to the channel. It goes a long way to help me out, but it also tells me what videos you all are interested in watching. But before we go down the rabbit hole that is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, let's talk about our sponsor, NordVPN. NordVPN is an easy-to-use, fast, and secure service allowing you to connect to over 5,200 different servers in 59 countries. They use diskless servers that don't store any data or configuration on site, and they have a double VPN allowing you to route your traffic through 2 different VPN servers. NordVPN is available on a ton of different platforms including Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, and even your Android TV. NordVPN allows you to watch some of your favorite content that is available in other countries on Netflix, for example. It's actually super easy too. With just one click, you open the map, connect to a server, and you're connected within seconds. Using my link, nordvpn.com/valismind, you can get a huge discount and 4 months for free. All of this also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's honestly a no-brainer because you're saving over $100 in 2 years of service using my link, nordvpn.com/valismind. So what are you waiting for? Just click on my link down below and start protecting yourself online today. So when I say most people are gonna enjoy it, I mean it. I actually found myself really enjoying the experience with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, more than I thought. I actually switched to the iPhone 14 Pro Max because I have an Apple Watch Ultra, and I've been using the Apple Watch because I've had a few health concerns that have popped up recently, but so far, I've been pretty impressed. The biggest change to the phone is something that you'll notice immediately: the dynamic island. I'm not gonna lie, in the beginning, it was really hard not to clown on this thing. I mean, the name alone is stupid enough, but dynamic it is. And I guess the island refers to how large and absolutely intrusive it is, but we'll get to that later. The Face ID sensor has been tucked into it with a little tiny unlock animation. That animation now feels at home instead of being directly in the center of your phone, pulling your focus away from what you're doing. Now, it's honestly something that you don't even think about. You look at your phone and it just unlocks. It can tell you if your AirPods are connecting, show the cover art of the song that you're listening to, and it can even give you quick access toggles within specific applications just by holding it. With the AirPods, for example, you can actually see the battery life and the status of whether or not they're connected immediately without taking away from what you're doing. Small things like this have made it an enjoyable experience, but when it comes to the dynamic island, that's pretty much all it does for me. Most YouTubers I watch upload their content in a 21:9 format. This would be fine on other phones, even the 13 Pro Max with its notch, but due to the size of the dynamic island, it's just hard not to notice it. And if you're watching full screen content, or playing a game, it's just gonna look really out of place, and honestly, it's very intrusive. Even on Twitter, this black oval just blocks out everybody's header, which is really annoying. Another new feature is the always on display. Not that Apple did it first or anything, but whether they did it better is kind of up to you. The always on display is just that. Your screen is literally always on. Unlike most Android phones that show you the clock and notifications, this literally just dims your entire lock screen. It shows you live events, full-size notifications, your clock, and even your widgets. The thing is, it's not so dim. In fact, there's a lot of times where I end up reaching my phone to lock it because I think it's still on. You can turn the always on display off, and I feel like most people will do that as it really does chew through your battery, though in an upcoming iOS update, you will have the ability to make it look more like a traditional always on display and actually disable the notifications. That's actually what I've been using since it's released, and I actually like it a lot more and find that it really does help out with that battery life. About the battery though, it's good and it's kind of what you've learned to expect from an iPhone as of late. When I don't use the phone as much, I'm actually able to get through 2 entire days on a charge, which I think is pretty good. Though it's not actually an improvement over the iPhone 13 Pro Max, especially when you have that always on display turned on. But to be honest, I don't really expect anyone to complain about this battery life because there's only a handful of phones out there that actually do beat this. The display is also good despite it just being ever so close to 1440p, but at 460 ppi, I don't even think resolution matters. The display is really sharp, it has amazing contrast, especially with its boasted 1600 nits of peak brightness in HDR content. And theoretically outdoors you can reach 2000 nits, though I haven't actually experienced this yet, and because of the Canadian weather recently, I really don't even care to try it out. It also does have ProMotion, which is as smooth as always, but I find it to not be as smooth as something like the Pixel 7 in most cases, despite the Pixel 7 being only 90 Hz as opposed to 120. Now, this is because the Pixel 7 is actually pegged at 90 Hz, whereas the iPhone dynamically refreshes the display depending on what content is being displayed. So it's not that the iPhone display is slower than the Pixel, it's just that in most cases it's gonna feel like it. But realistically, anything above 60 is gonna feel good in a smartphone, so it's not something that I really care to complain about. And also, if you're coming from the 13 Pro Max, you've already experienced ProMotion, so if you like it, that's exactly what it is on the 14 Pro. And just to be clear, it's such a niche thing, I honestly don't really see anyone actually noticing the difference between the two. About recognizing the difference though, that brings me to the camera. Although the new iPhones actually have a 48 megapixel sensor, it's larger and it actually allows for more light to come in, the photos that you take on it are going to look a lot like the iPhone 13 Pro's photos unless you're using Pro RAW to actually take advantage of that 48 megapixel sensor. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't shoot in RAW on my iPhone. I mean, the whole point of using your phone to take a photo is that it's something quick that you don't have to worry about just to snap a moment. If I wanted to take a really high resolution RAW image, I would just use my A7C. However, I don't speak for everybody and a lot of people don't have mirrorless cameras, so having this high resolution Pro RAW in a phone, it's honestly really cool. For video though, it's a completely different story. The video on the iPhone has always been a cut above the competition, and now with improved low light performance, filming on the iPhone is just better than it ever was. This is something that I actually utilize a lot for shorts, or if there's something that I missed while shooting these videos, I can always just go back and take the iPhone because honestly, when it comes to the video quality, not a lot of people are gonna notice the difference. There's also action mode, which is cool. It's just like a stabilization feature meant for sports. I don't really care about it and I'm sure most people won't, so I'm just not even gonna talk about that. However, I'm gonna be honest because my experience really hasn't been that great. This is my second iPhone 14 Pro. The phone I pre-ordered and did my unboxing with was a silver iPhone 14 Pro, non-max, and in the first couple of days, a few glaring issues started to show up. When sitting in my den, which I call my office, there was virtually no cell reception, and that made it really annoying because I was waiting on a lot of doctor's appointments or even just phone calls from my fiance or my mom. Every time I picked up one of those calls, they were instantly dropped, or I would just completely miss them because it was a dead zone. This is unlike every other phone that I've used though, and even something like the Fold gets full reception in here. That being said, on the 14 Pro Max, this isn't an issue, So if you're buying the 14 Pro, just keep that in mind. But even when the phone calls did work, I actually had a hardware problem. The earpiece speaker was completely broken. It was really muffled. The audio that was coming out of it was absolutely terrible, and it wasn't even loud enough to hear who was talking on the other end. Combine that with the horrible battery drain that I was experiencing on that phone, barely being able to push it past 4 hours of screen on time, and all of the bugs that plagued the early launch of iOS 16, it was just not a good experience. That's what ultimately led me to returning the 14 Pro, and thankfully Apple actually let me return it outside of the return period because I had so many issues with the phone. It actually seemed like my luck with the 14 Pro kind of followed me into the 14 Pro Max, because literally a week after buying this phone, it had slipped out of my pocket and just got completely obliterated. To be fair, that was completely my fault, and with Apple Care, it only cost $44 to fix, but I just can't help but think that's hilarious. But this kind of does lead me into a point that I wanted to throw in. If you're buying an iPhone and you purchase something like Apple Care, at least you know for the next few years that you own this device, you're kind of gonna be protected. I can't really say the same thing about Samsung Care or any other companies, because I've had terrible experiences with Samsung pretty much in any way regarding customer service. A few weeks back, I had to contact Samsung because they charged me for a case that never arrived. I'm not even kidding, it took like 4 weeks to get this resolved and like 15 phone calls. I was just being bounced back and forth to literally everyone, and it was probably the most infuriating process. But overall, my experience with the 14 Pro Max has been generally really good, and honestly, this phone's a really safe bet to recommend to just anyone. However, if you want to try out something that's a little different and even more exciting, I will link a video down below to my review of the Z Fold 4. But anyways, that's been it. Hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like down below, potentially even a sub to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.